I used to think I was lucky. A corporate job with benefits on paper, a steady paycheck that arrived on time, a clean office with glass walls and motivational posters about teamwork and integrity, a boss who called everyone team and signed his emails with smiley faces. His name was Trevor Kane, and he loved saying the same sentence at every meeting. "We're a family here." At first it felt reassuring, comforting even. Then I learned what kind of family he meant. Trevor ran our department like a private kingdom. He did not hire the confident or confrontational. He hired people who needed stability. Single parents, new graduates buried in student loans, immigrants still learning the system, older employees who could not afford to start over, people who would not rock the boat. And once you were in, he squeezed. It started small enough to ignore. Over time, that was never approved but always expected. Weekend work reframed as being a team player. Lunch breaks that vanished when deadlines crept closer. If anyone questioned it, Trevor laughed like they were naive. "That's not how corporate works," he would say. "If you want to move up, you show commitment." Commitment was his favorite word. It was also his sharpest weapon. Raises were always coming soon. Promotions were always under review. Bonuses were always stuck in approvals. But Trevor's office changed constantly. New desk, new chair, bigger monitor, glass walls that made sure everyone could see him working late. He called it company investment. Meanwhile, I watched my co-workers quietly struggle. Carla, a single mother of two, stayed late every night because Trevor told her she was lucky to have a flexible job. When she left on time, he sighed and asked if her priorities had shifted. Jamal, fresh out of school, was kept on a trial period that never ended. No raise, no review, just more responsibility. Trevor told him he should be grateful for the experience. I watched people skip vacations, cancel dentist appointments, and pretend it was temporary. And me? I became the one who noticed patterns. Pay stubs that did not match logged hours, policies that existed on paper but were never followed, rules Trevor quoted that I could not find anywhere in writing. Every time someone pushed back, Trevor used the same trick. He pulled them into his office, shut the door, and came out smiling. They came out pale. After that, they stopped asking questions. Trevor never threatened anyone outright. He did not need to. He used schedules, performance reviews, small comments dropped in meetings. "Are you sure you can handle this role? You seem distracted lately. I worry you are not a culture fit." Somehow the people who questioned him always became the problem. It was not just the money. It was the way Trevor made people feel small for noticing. Meetings ran long just to see who shifted in their chairs. If someone glanced at the clock, he paused and smiled. "Some of us are committed," he would say. "Others are not." No names, no confrontation, just humiliation disguised as leadership. The worst part was how normal it all became. People stopped complaining, stopped hoping, stopped planning futures that did not involve exhaustion. New hires learned quickly who to trust and who to stay quiet around. Trevor thrived in that silence. He walked the office like he was untouchable. The moment everything changed was painfully ordinary. I stayed late one evening fixing payroll discrepancies, work I was never supposed to be doing, and found a folder buried deep in a shared drive. It was not labeled payroll, it was labeled control. Inside were spreadsheets I will never forget, columns showing what each employee should have been paid, what they actually were paid, and one final column titled savings. Trevor had been underpaying us on purpose, for years, tracking it, proud of it. That was the moment I stopped feeling lucky and started feeling angry, because once you see a man counting what he stole from you, you stop believing he will ever give it back. And you start thinking about how to take it all back instead. Once I knew Trevor was doing it on purpose, everything changed. Every interaction took on a different meaning. The casual comments, the fake concern, the way he always seemed calm while everyone else was stretched thin. Trevor was not disorganized or careless. He had built a system. He knew exactly who needed the job most, who had a mortgage, who had children, who was new to the country, who did not know labor laws well enough to argue. He used that knowledge carefully. Carla was dependable, so he worked her the hardest. Every request for time off was met with a reminder of how flexible her role already was. He told her other companies would never accommodate a single mother the way he did. She started apologizing for asking. Jamal was ambitious, so Trevor fed him hope instead of money. Every review sounded positive. Every meeting ended with encouragement. He was always told he was close to a promotion. Just not ready yet. Months passed, then years. Others were punished quietly. Schedules changed with no notice. Projects were reassigned midstream. Performance goals shifted just enough that failure felt personal instead of planned. Anyone who asked questions was labeled difficult. Anyone who asked twice was labeled emotional. Anyone who compared pay was accused of creating a hostile work environment. Trevor's favorite tactic was the private meeting. He would call someone into his office, shut the door, and lower his voice. He never raised it. He never threatened. He just asked questions that made people doubt themselves. "Are you sure you understand how compensation works?" "I worry you may be misinterpreting things." "I would hate for this to affect your future here." People walked into those meetings standing straight. They walked out smaller. After that, they stopped talking. Silence became part of the culture. People learned to speak carefully, or not at all. Conversations stopped when Trevor walked by. Laughter faded quickly. Desks emptied earlier and earlier as people tried to avoid being noticed. Trevor encouraged it without ever saying so. He praised loyalty in public and punished independence in private. Those who stayed quiet were rewarded with stability. Those who questioned him were reminded how easily they could be replaced. The office felt smaller every day. Not physically, but emotionally. Trevor understood fear better than policy. He rewarded silence and punished curiosity. People who kept their heads down were given just enough comfort to survive. People who asked questions lost small privileges first: a preferred schedule, a project they enjoyed, an invitation to a meeting that mattered. He liked reminding people how replaceable they were. He talked often about budgets, layoffs, and market instability, not as threats, but as facts everyone should keep in mind. Once, during a company update, he mentioned how grateful employees should be to have steady work in an uncertain economy. He looked directly at Carla when he said it. Another time, he joked that people who obsessed over hours probably did not belong in professional environments. Everyone laughed again. The message was always the same: stay quiet, be thankful, do not ask questions. And slowly, people learned to protect themselves by saying nothing at all. I tested the system once, just once. I sent a neutral email asking for clarification about overtime policy. No accusations, no emotion, just a request for information. The response came the following week. My workload doubled, deadlines tightened without explanation. Projects I had always handled were reassigned. Meetings I was usually invited to happened without me. Trevor smiled every time he passed my desk. Then he started planting doubt. He asked coworkers if I seemed overwhelmed, if I was struggling, if I needed support. Support was his word for removal. He suggested I step back from responsibilities. Fewer projects, less visibility. He framed it as concern. It was meant to isolate me. And for a while, it worked. Until coworkers started approaching me quietly. Not to complain, but to compare notes. To ask if what they were experiencing was real. They told me about unpaid hours, missing overtime, pay that never matched promises, reviews that went nowhere. I did not persuade anyone. I showed them proof. Pay stubs, emails, schedules, timelines that repeated too often to be coincidence. Fear turned into anger. Anger turned into resolve. We started sharing information carefully, comparing numbers, mapping how long this had really been happening. Trevor continued as if nothing had changed. He held meetings about transparency while hiding data. He talked about trust while punishing honesty. He reminded us how lucky we were to work for someone who cared. And we nodded. Because he still believed he was untouchable. He had no idea how close he was to losing everything, or how quietly it had already begun. Trevor believed silence meant loyalty. He mistook fear for respect. So when questions first started coming from outside the department, he assumed it would end the same way everything else always had. Quietly, internally, with people backing down once pressure appeared. What Trevor never understood was that corporate leadership had not been protecting him. They had simply never been looking closely. The moment compliance reviewed the records, the tone changed. The spreadsheets did not resemble mistakes or miscommunication. They showed intent. Years of deliberate underpayment, altered payroll entries, overtime removed line by line, stolen wages tracked carefully and labeled as savings. Corporate escalated it immediately. Within days, the Labour Board referred the case to criminal investigators. That was when the story broke. The first headline appeared early one morning before most of us were even at work. Corporate manager charged in widespread wage theft scheme. By noon, it was everywhere. The article laid everything out clearly. How employees had been systematically underpaid for years. How internal records had been falsified. How stolen wages were hidden in a private file labeled control. It named Trevor Kane. It named the company. And it made one thing unmistakably clear. Corporate leadership had no prior knowledge. They issued a public statement within hours. Full cooperation, accountability, apologies, a promise to repair the damage. They announced an independent audit across all departments. Any current or former employee who had ever worked under Trevor Kane was urged to come forward. They guaranteed protection from retaliation. They promised restitution. People came forward in waves, former employees who had left quietly, who thought they had misunderstood their pay, who blamed themselves for not working hard enough, who carried years of shame they never deserved. Their stories matched perfectly. The evidence stacked higher by the day. Trevor was arrested without spectacle. No cameras, no speech, no smile. Just handcuffs and a courtroom where his own spreadsheets were projected on a screen for everyone to see. Every column, every total, every dollar he thought no one would notice. He pleaded not guilty. The evidence disagreed. Trevor was convicted of theft and fraud. Trevor's sentencing became public record within hours. Court documents were shared online. Screenshots spread across social media. Former colleagues, industry peers, and even people who had once praised him publicly began distancing themselves. The company released a second statement that afternoon. They confirmed that Trevor had acted alone, that senior leadership had no prior knowledge of his actions, that internal controls had failed, and those failures were now being addressed publicly. They announced a full review of every department Trevor had ever touched. Then came the part no one expected, a press conference. Corporate legal stood in front of cameras and asked any current or former employee who had worked under Trevor Kane to come forward immediately. They warned there may be additional victims. They promised restitution. They promised transparency. Phones rang non-stop for days. Former employees called from other cities, other countries, some with records going back years. Every story added weight. Every account confirmed the same pattern. By the time sentencing concluded, Trevor's name had become synonymous with wage theft. No one defended him. The man who once lectured us about professionalism left the courtroom in silence. The fallout did not stop with the verdict. Corporate repaid every stolen dollar with interest. Settlement checks arrived. Back pay. Overtime. Compensation for years of lost income. Then came something none of us expected. Opportunity. Employees were invited to apply for corporate roles anywhere in the company. Any office, any country. No retaliation. No questions asked. Carla transferred to an office closer to her children's school. For the first time, she worked normal hours and slept without stress. Jamal accepted a senior corporate position he had been qualified for all along. Others relocated, advanced, all left with enough financial security to start over on their own terms. And me? I was asked to step in temporarily, then permanently. I took over the department Trevor once ruled through fear. I changed the culture slowly, transparently. Pay was clear. Boundaries were enforced. Respect was not optional. The system Trevor built collapsed because it relied on silence. Once that silence broke, everything followed. He lost his career, his reputation, his freedom. we gain something far more valuable than revenge. We gain proof that exploitation only survives when people are too afraid to speak. And the moment they do, even the most carefully hidden theft comes to light, quietly, relentlessly, beneath the bindings.